Apple just announced the brand new iPhone 15 series, and the advancements to the camera system are something we need to talk about. We're going to cover every major upgrade, talk through whether or not it's actually going to impact us as content creators, and finally make the judgment everyone wants to know: is it worth upgrading? My name is Anthony Gallo from contentcreator.com. Let's dive into it. So to start, we have the basic 4-model format that Apple always goes with. We have the regular iPhone 15, the Plus, the Pro, and the Pro Max. And as you can imagine, the Pro models have the most impressive upgrades, and they actually did something drastically different this year between the Pro and the Pro Max, which we'll touch on later. On the other hand, the 15 and the 15 Plus are essentially the same phone, outside of the Plus having a slightly larger 6.7-inch screen compared to the regular 6.1-inch on the base model. When it comes to the cameras, the biggest upgrade on the basic models was the introduction of that same 48-megapixel sensor that we saw on last year's iPhone 14 Pro models. With more megapixels, we get more detailed photos while still being able to implement pixel binning, which is essentially combining smaller pixels together to improve the amount of light that we're able to capture. This is definitely going to improve your low light performance on those phones. More importantly though, you can crop into that larger megapixel sensor to get a 2x or 52mm focal length. So for video, this is still going to record in that 4K quality, and it essentially takes a camera that has always only had 2 lenses and upgrades it to 3 higher quality focal length options. You have the 13mm ultra wide camera, and then the 26mm standard can also double as a 52mm slight telephoto lens. Now you would think that this is going to hurt the draw for the Pro phone series, since having 3 lenses was always one of their bigger differentiating factors, but just wait until you hear what they did with the Pro models this year. Now what I also really like about this 2x crop mode is because of the fact that you're not actually changing lenses, going from 1x to 2x, in video mode you can now get a super smooth, seamless zoom in effect from 1 to 2x or 2x to 1x. In the past, with most smartphones, I always recommend people never zoom in while you're actually recording because you're just gonna lose a ton of quality. But now being able to crop into that 2x mode without losing any resolution, we can actually zoom in our content. Now on top of this, across the board, all 4 iPhone models also got the upgrade that Apple is calling Smart HDR. HDR meaning high dynamic range, which will apparently give photos better dynamic range and also better colors across the board compared to previous phones. Granted, they didn't show any side-by-side comparisons, so we'll have to wait for the phones to actually come out to see just how impactful Smart HDR is. And they also didn't specifically mention if Smart HDR is also going to carry over into video modes. Then finally, across the board, all of the iPhone models have a super cool feature that allows us to turn basically any picture taken on an iPhone into a portrait photo with that blurry background, or at least any photo that has a clearly defined human, dog, or cat subject in the frame. This is actually super helpful because sometimes that moment is happening and you want to get that beautiful portrait style photo, but you don't have time to switch between modes. Now we can just take any photo and add the blurry background after the fact. And I definitely like this for cats and dogs because they don't really hold those cute poses for very long. Okay, so that basically does it for the 15 and the 15 Plus. Nothing crazy on that side, but it's time we move on to the big boys, the Pro and the Pro Max. They actually had some really significant changes that I think all content creators should be aware of. Up first, the titanium bodies. It's just epic. I absolutely love the look of these new phones. I'm sure the durability and the fact that they're lighter is nice, but we all know Apple did it for the curb appeal. Apple also added a customizable action button that you can map to a bunch of different things. And I actually think this matters a lot for content creators. I've always really loved that on the Galaxy series, if you double tap the lock button, it opens up the camera right away. I love that feature so much that I constantly find myself doing it on my iPhone, which just opens up Apple Pay. There are so many moments where I just don't have time to open up the actual camera. I want to snap that photo or video. And now that we have this customizable button, we can actually map that to open the camera. So 2 cool new features, but let's talk about the actual cameras. Apple started by claiming that the 48 megapixel 24mm camera that's on the iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max is even more advanced than last year. But if you start peeping through those specs, they aren't really different. In fact, they're actually identical on paper as they present it in their keynote. Outside of the fact that the speaker does claim it has an even bigger sensor. And I'm basically interpreting that as they didn't really increase the size that much, because every other sensor that they increased the size on, they specifically said 25% bigger, 60% bigger, whatever it may be. When it comes to the standard 24mm camera, the biggest advancement in my eyes is the fact that they added that nanoscale coating, which they claim is gonna help cut down on the lens flares that you get out of these cameras. This is actually a really big problem for anyone who shoots a lot of content on smartphones. They have this tendency to reflect harsh lights all throughout the visible frame, which can be really distracting and just doesn't look professional. So I'm really hoping that this nanoscale coating just completely eliminates that problem. So overall, we've got some minor improvements on that main camera. But the truly shocking upgrades to the Pro models in my eyes comes down to two things that have nothing to do with that main camera. The first big thing is the fact that the iPhone Pro Max completely got rid of the 77mm telephoto lens that has been a staple on the Pro models for years now, and they replaced it with a 5x 120mm super zoom lens. Now, the sensor behind this camera is also 25% larger than the previous 77mm telephoto on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So not only do we now have a significantly higher zoom capacity, the larger sensor also means significantly better low light performance, more of that natural blurry background, and generally speaking, it's just gonna have higher quality images and videos. What's even better is this 120mm lens has a fixed f2.8 aperture, which is a direct shot at the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, which has a 10x zoom lens. Yes, it has more zoom, but that camera has an f4.9 aperture, which is actually a massive difference. The lower aperture on the iPhone will mean significantly better straight out of camera photo and video quality. And I'm personally super excited about this because yes, I love the super zoom 10x on the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, but the quality isn't really good enough that I would want to include it in a professional piece of content. And it actually keeps getting better. Apple introduced an entirely new, never before seen stabilization mode for the super zoom lens that stabilizes the sensor up and down, left to right, and forward and backward. And they're calling this 3D stabilization. I'm really interested to see how this actually looks in real life because at that high of a focal length, stabilization becomes extremely important. And the better it is, the more likely I'll actually use that lens. Apple is claiming that this stabilization is 2 times better than the performance that they got out of the 77mm telephoto lens on the previous iPhone 14 Pro. Overall, I see this as a huge win for iPhone users. The previous 77mm lens was basically useless in my eyes when it came to producing anything that was worthy of being in a professional video. Smartphone content creators shooting both sports and wildlife will also really love this. Prior to this phone coming out, anytime somebody in our course, 14-Day Filmmaker, asked me what phone I recommended for shooting wildlife or sports, even though I like iPhones better, I always found myself recommending the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra because it had that 10x lens. But now I think iPhone definitely gets the edge. Even though it's 5x versus 10x, it's gonna be super high quality. And I'm sure this will last until February of next year when Samsung releases their newest phone. I can almost guarantee that they're gonna massively improve their 10x lens. So either way, this obviously creates a huge divide between the iPhone 15 Pro and the Pro Max because the regular Pro is now just gonna keep that old 77mm telephoto. Apparently the size of the smaller 15 Pro can't handle the larger space requirements of the 120mm super zoom lens. Now, aside from that one major difference between the two phones, both the Pro and the Pro Max can now claim that you can get 7 different lenses out of their camera system. Going from the widest all the way up, you have the macro mode and then the 13mm ultra wide, both coming from one lens. Then using the main lens on the iPhone 15, you're gonna get the 24mm, but you also have a 28mm option, a 35mm option, and a 48mm option by cropping in on that main sensor. And then finally, with the third camera, you get either the 77mm or the 120mm, depending on which Pro model you go with. The versatility and different looks that we're gonna be able to produce with smartphones now with this many lenses basically built in, it's getting insane, and I absolutely love it. Now, I said there were 2 major upgrades in my eyes, and what we just covered, that was only the first one. Before I dive into the second one though, just a quick request. If you enjoy learning how to produce professional content, no matter what camera you have, definitely hit that subscribe button below. And even more so, I'd urge you to check out our full online course, 14-Day Filmmaker, that teaches A to Z everything you need to know to produce professional cinematic content with your smartphone for YouTube, social media, and even commercial content. The link to learn more is in the description beneath this video. Lifetime access to our entire program that's helped over 100,000 people costs just $48. But enough with the self-promotion. back to the video. So the second main improvement on both the 15 Pro and the 15 Pro Max is the ability to record directly to an external hard drive in ProRes 4K at 60 frames per second. Not only that, but we now have log encoding, which supports the ACES color management workflow. That was a lot, I'm sure, so let's unpack that all. First, what is ProRes? Well, to keep it simple, ProRes is a super high quality video format because it significantly limits the amount of visual data lost due to compression. Basically, whenever most common cameras record video, the video is compressed to limit the amount of space it actually takes up. And that compression causes the video to actually lose some of its valuable data. ProRes is a video format designed by Apple where, yes, compression still takes place, but the data being lost isn't visually noticeable at all. So overall, it's super high quality and it's compressed significantly less, which also means we have the ability to manipulate and edit the footage a lot more before it starts to fall apart and just look unprofessional. So that's what ProRes is. Why does it matter that we can record it externally to a hard drive? So because ProRes files are compressed less than most footage, the files tend to be insanely large. So large that I basically never use the feature on my iPhone 13 Pro and my iPhone 14 Pro Max because just transferring them to my computer using AirDrop or using a cord, it's basically a nightmare. Recording to an external hard drive means we, A, don't have to deal with a painful transfer from the phone since it's already on a hard drive that we can just plug right into our computer, and then B, we also don't have to worry about filling our entire phone storage up in like 5 minutes with the massive ProRes files. And by the way, the only reason this transfer is even possible to begin with is due to the brand new USB-C port on the new iPhones. All 4 models have the USB-C port, but apparently the USB-C on the Pro phone series has an extra controller upgrade, which means data transfer speeds of up to 20 times faster. AKA, this is the reason we can transfer such high quality footage immediately to an external hard drive as we record it. So that's ProRes and recording externally, but we also have the ability to shoot in 4K at 60 frames per second versus all the previous models which only allowed us to shoot it in up to 30 frames per second. This means more ProRes flexibility if we want to get more smooth slow motion in our projects. And then finally, with this huge improvement, we have log encoding to support ACES color management workflows. This is a huge historic milestone for smartphones. A log picture profile is a super flat and low contrast profile on your camera. This preserves more dynamic range in the video, allowing us to bring that beautiful, juicy color and contrast back in and still have a higher quality video than if we just shot it in a standard picture profile. ACES, on the other hand, is an industry term for a unifying standard for color across multiple different cameras and brands. So in other words, this means it will be much easier to perfectly color match the footage produced by an iPhone to the colors produced by other super high-end professional cameras. All in all, these are huge wins for smartphones and for people looking to squeeze the absolute highest quality footage out of their smartphones. So that's a basic summary of the largest things that I think were improved on in the new phone models, mainly the Pro and the Pro Max. Before we dive into my final conclusion on whether or not it's worth upgrading, I do want to mention 2 huge things that weren't touched on at all in this release. And I feel these were huge opportunities for Apple to listen to their customers and make some major improvements to their camera systems. The first was cinematic mode. Unless I blacked out during the event, I just didn't hear them mention this at all. I think cinematic mode is one of the most exciting features within modern smartphones, allowing them to really challenge the look of pro mirrorless and DSLR camera footage. However, despite how awesome cinematic mode is, there are still some limitations. Specifically, the edge blurring is not quite as good as I'd like it to be, and we're not able to film in 4K at 60 frames per second, which would be huge. I would love to have slow motion in cinematic mode. And then finally, I've noticed that filming in cinematic mode, there are usually some color shifts, specifically with skin tones, that can be kind of a nightmare to deal with in the edit. Overall, I would have really loved for Apple to have announced that they were making some big improvements in these areas. The second thing that I was really hoping to hear was the addition of more manual setting controls like shutter speed, ISO, and white balance being built directly into the native camera app. Despite the fact that I think iPhones truly have the best video quality of any smartphone, I do really love how most Android phones allow users to control exposure and white balance settings directly in the app. Yes, we can use third-party apps on iPhones, but having it all under one roof in one app would really simplify our lives as content creators. But okay, on to the final conclusion. Is it worth upgrading? And before I give you my answer, definitely leave a comment below with your opinion on the topic. I'm really curious how other people thought this event went. Okay, but now to my opinion. Generally speaking, when it comes to all of the advancements made, I do think that the iPhone 15 Pro Max is a really serious device for content creators, and it is definitely worth the price that they're charging for it. The regular 15 Pro is good. I don't think it's anywhere near as valuable or attractive as the Pro Max, but it's definitely still a really good phone. And then finally, the standard 15 and the 15 Plus phones are basically the 14 Pros from last year minus the telephoto option. So not quite as exciting. Should absolutely everyone upgrade? No, definitely not. And I think that's the general consensus from most people who watch the event. I think if you have an iPhone 13 Pro or 14 Pro, the difference won't really feel all that significant unless you for sure need a phone that has to have better zoom capabilities for wildlife and sports content, in which case, yeah, you would upgrade, but only to the 15 Pro Max. But on the flip side, if you've got a significantly older phone, like beyond 3 to 4 years old, I think this upgrade is absolutely worth it, and your mind will probably be blown when it comes to all of the new features that you're gonna have access to with the camera that's always in your pocket. And I don't think you can go wrong with any of the 4 phone models. I would say define your budget and then buy the best option that fits within your budget. So generally speaking, if you've bought an iPhone in the past year or so and you're just shooting social media content, YouTube videos, commercials, or even home videos, it's probably better to wait it out for 1 more year. Unless of course you're independently wealthy watching this YouTube video from your yacht while swimming in your pool of dollar bills. If that's you, yeah, upgrade. I don't even care what phone you have. Now, with all of this being said, if you want to learn how to shoot the best quality content with your smartphone without having to drop thousands of dollars on the newest gear or even professional cameras, definitely check out our full online course, 14-Day Filmmaker. This is not just another run-of-the-mill film course. It's already helped over 100,000 students learn to shoot and edit better content for their YouTube channels, their social media channels. These people are creating more professional marketing content for their brands, and they're also making a living shooting content for other people's businesses. When you enroll, you get lifetime access to an insane amount of valuable training content, all designed to follow this streamlined path that helps you learn significantly faster than just aimlessly searching the internet for the answers to all of your questions. We cover the gear, the cinematic settings, the lighting, how to record professional audio, how to capture cinematic movements. You get mini courses on all of the best pro editing software and mini courses on all of the best free apps that you can get on your phone and your computer. You can even join me on our weekly live Q&A calls that I host in our private student community. I'd love to become your virtual mentor and help you crush it as a content creator. If you're interested, the course only costs $48, and the link to learn more is in the description beneath this video. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.